Okay, we'll call this meeting to order at 7:01. For those joining us online, this is the Affordable Housing Committee meeting of Wednesday, September 13th. We're meeting in the second floor conference room, the Old Town Hall, as well as via Zoom. We do have a quorum present, Mr. Chair. This meeting is being recorded for those following online and in person. Just want to be mindful of that. So with that, I will turn things over to you, Herb, Mr. Chair, for your welcoming remarks, and we'll go from there.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. We've got some guest speakers tonight. Emmeline is going to meet with us, and we've got also Ray, who's going to be with us to talk about the in lieu of. So we're delighted. And also, of course, John Wynn, the illustrious John Wynn,
The illustrious
Charter Commission and the Strategic Planning Commission.
Yep.
And Jackie.
Citizen of the.
Yeah, you really are. You really are blessed. So great to have you all here. I guess our first item of business will be to just a minute. Any of the members want to?
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Heather?
Did we get any discussion?
Any discussion?
Comments?
Any discussion? Heather, anything for the minute?
Oh, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank
Can
you.
I ask a question or
Yes.
a comment on that?
You gave him enough time to ask questions.
Yeah. So, I don't recall, was I here last month? I don't recall any discussion about 60 Katona.
Briefly.
What's the status? Anything?
I'll provide an update, but
Oh,
yeah, we will
okay.
have, we actually have a code review meeting scheduled for early October.
Yeah,
As you may know, the
Yeah.
property, it's a two-story office building. They're considering converting it to 18 units to residential, so.
it's across the street from Billy's Bakery.
It is across the
Yeah.
street and next to McDonald's.
Yeah,
On
and
that.
there's other condos right nearby.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a good location, actually it sets up well for a conversion. Emmeline and I have met with the property owner and architect a couple times, and we're having a code review meeting in October, so that'll be.
Is the architect any good?
Is that?
Is the architect any good?
Yeah, we think so. I mean, he's converting the existing structure, so there's a limit to what you can do with, you know, what you have to work with there, but
Time and money.
it does, well, yeah, there were other proposals, and we think this is a far better utilization of the property.
Good, thank you.
I guess next item is guest speaker is Emmeline going first? Is that what we decided?
I think we drew straws or
Yeah.
something for him. There it is. See that? So.
Well, we've got two
I can
items,
direct.
I guess we wanted to chat with you about this evening, at least two. Was one, certainly the POCD and also the ADU seminar that and the status of ADU applications and approvals, because we're going to be talking about the ADU seminar that we hope to redo in November.
Fantastic.
Great.
So thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to come before you as the Affordable Housing Committee. So I'm just going to do a brief overview of the POCD, why we redo it, what's required in the statute now, as opposed to when the POCD was comprehensively redone in 2000, and amendments were added in 2016, adopted in 2017. So state statute dictates what has to be included within the POCD. Some of the things that are new since those two, the comprehensive plan in 2000 and the update in 2016 is we are required to provide a sewer service map. And this is, I think, in response to a lot of rapid suburbanization that was happening. You know, for Fairfield, we're fairly built out, right? But there was a lot of suburbanization in other parts of the state. And so understanding how the state was going to have to help to support that very broad expansion of infrastructure was a big deal. So I believe it was like 2008, 2009, where that went into effect. And I think it was really something where, because the 2016 was kind of an amendment, but not a significant revision, it wasn't mandated at that time, but we do need to include it this time. We also have to, in keeping with that, you know, the state plan of conservation and development has what's called a locational guide map. And they really want to focus development and redevelopment areas in portions of the state with existing infrastructure. So we need to kind of drill down and show where that's going to occur in Fairfield as well. Mixed use and TOD identification is transit-oriented development identification is required. Agriculture protection and preservation were appropriate. Because we are a Long Island Sound adjacent community, we do need to talk about sea level rise in terms of what the mandated planning threshold is, which is the 50 inches by 2050. So basically 1 foot 7 inches, I believe, and how that might impact what we intend to do with our land use. We also are required to look at housing for aging populations, and also technology infrastructure. There's also differences in terms of our noticing requirements. Back in 2000, it really wasn't customary to post things on your website. Obviously, a lot's changed, exacerbated by the pandemic, but we do need to post the plan on the website for public viewing. We also have revised review times with our Regional Council of Governments. There is a local review that we're required to provide the Plan of Conservation and Development to our Board of Selectmen, although they're not required to take any action. So we should note that. And then, you know, the major thing that occurred over a decade ago was that the POCD is now tied to discretionary funding. So if we decided, as the town of Fairfield, to kind of just let our POCD lapse and not actively adopt a new POCD every 10 years, our ability to apply for grant funding through the state of Connecticut, whether it's open space, brownfields, housing grants, we would be limited in our ability to do that. So when we were looking to update this plan, we really did look at what other organizations in town were doing. We didn't want to recreate the wheel. We wanted to build off of the really great planning work that you all have done as the Affordable Housing Committee, the Recreation Department has done in looking at recreation facilities, economic development, sustainable Fairfield, the list goes on and on. One of the things that was very crucial that was kind of sandwiched in between when we initially started our POCD process in 2018 was the understanding that Fairfielders feel very strongly that most of Fairfield, they want to remain exactly the same. So where we need to be very targeted and focused is, as dictated by state statute, where we have existing infrastructure, transit-oriented development. So we took about a year plus to do a transit-oriented development study, focusing on Metro Center, but also kind of discussing the downtown area. And sorry, I don't know if anybody's in these pictures, but these are pictures of we did comprehensive workshops at Sacred Heart, Fairfield U, and Penfield Pavilion right before the close of the, right before the pandemic hit us, and then unfortunately we had to kind of take a planning pause. Our reintroduction to kind of reaching out to the public was our virtual workshop, where we kind of checked in with people. We felt very strongly that we needed to see whether or not their viewpoints had changed. Given the pandemic, we understand that people more heavily used our open spaces throughout our community. People are walking more, they were biking more. So, it really, I think, strengthened some of the things that we thought before the pandemic. And the virtual workshop, I think, reinforced some of the policies that we were already heading towards that we've included in the POCD. We did an open house in April, at the end of April. And we kind of introduced these vision statements and themes that were based upon that outreach that we did. So Fairfield, in the next 10 years, we would like to be a resilient community, and that ties in the sea level rise analysis, an environmentally rooted community, which speaks to our open spaces and recreation and conservation areas, a community that is home for all, and we frankly borrowed heavily from the very important work that you guys in the Affordable Housing Committee did. Sustainably Prosperous Community, which touches on how we focus and target our future economic development in ways that are sustainable for Fairfield. An Interconnected Community, which speaks to multimodal desires by Fairfielders to really look at our pedestrian infrastructure, our bike infrastructure, and also our roadway network and roadway safety issues. A community where people come together, borrowed very heavily from the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Again, we hope that this document really serves to kind of consolidate, again, the good planning that everybody's been doing in Fairfield, and hopefully move forward with some of those priorities. Sorry, it's a little sticky. So I'm not going to go through everything unless you feel strongly that I should. But again, for a resilient community, we're tying into also some of the work that the state of Connecticut has done with the Connecticut Institute of Resiliency and Climate Adaptation, where they're really looking at how do we kind of create the co-benefits of smart reinvestment in our communities while also creating resilient corridors, resilient hubs, resilient neighborhoods, and then also this ties into our hazard mitigation planning work that we're always doing, like every 5 years. So that's where, one of the things that was kind of new that we talked about was downzoning in strategic locations along the Rooster River. Those are very highly hazardous areas. We're getting flashier floods that come with very little to no warning. And it's just creating an environment where, we need to kind of very thoughtfully think about moving people, homes out of harm's way. So that's part of where we're thinking about kind of downzoning some of those residential areas in the Rooster River watershed.
Excuse me, I'm in line, but
Yeah.
Bridgeport is doing a lot of resilience studies and work over there, and they're getting a lot of money from the state and the feds. Are we getting any money from the state and the feds?
We get a little bit of money. We are not a distressed community, so we don't compete as well for those dollars sometimes. It depends on what the funding pool is. But our grant writer is very cognizant of looking at the factors that make us more competitive.
Emlyn, this is Heather Dabrowski. I have a question for you. I've actually been looking at this for the last few days, and I've actually written a letter as a resident of Fairfield to the town planning and zoning because I know it's before them, and I'm concerned about a few things, and I was hoping maybe you can address them. I'm concerned about the fact that from what I've read, and this is my personal opinion, that it appears that it's almost like the east side of town is being split off, and it kind of makes Fairfield almost two different towns. And I'm concerned about that. But my biggest question here for you is, have you spoken to the Board of Ed and presented this to the Board of Ed? And the reason I'm asking that particular question is we're in the middle of redistricting. And it's very tenacious, and there's a lot going on. And as you know, redistricting is not easy for anyone. And I'm very fearful that this is being fast tracked now instead of the due date of 2026, excuse me. And if we redistrict now without taking this into, consideration, that any redistricting efforts will be null and void. So I'm just curious, have you presented this to the Board of Ed and what their comments were?
We haven't for this final plan. We can certainly reach out to them. But, we're not intending to change the zoning of any of the single-family neighborhoods. We have one as of right single-family and duplex neighborhood that is adjacent to Metro Center that we're looking to upzone. And we are downzoning an area that is between the highway and Kings Highway, and downzoning that from as of right 2 to 4 family, as of right single family and duplex, down to single family. And that's something, for example, that New York City has done in highly hazardous flood zone areas. So for the rest of the single family neighborhoods like Stratfield and all of those other neighborhoods, we're not actually proposing any kind of zoning change or, density change.
But when you add sewers, what that does is it opens the door for multiple 830G builds, which I'm certainly not saying we're not having a housing crisis. However, all that's going to impact one side of town. And that's very, concerning, especially as we're in the middle of a very difficult redistricting process. And I implore you to go to the Board of Ed and talk, because I don't understand why this is being fast tracked now in 2023 versus closer to the due date of 2026.
This process was initiated by the former Plan and Zoning Commission chair. After they had made revisions, they instructed staff to get to work on redoing the plan, because it really was just an addition of elements, but it wasn't a comprehensive rewrite. So this wasn't something that, this was something that was commission driven. They asked us to revise this plan. We started this work back in 2018. We met with departments in 2017, actually. So this has been kind of a long ramp up to kind of getting to where we are now with the draft document. So this isn't something that we haven't been working on for quite some time. The east side of town is already sewered. And in talking to our interim public works director, part of the problem with the east side of town is we have a 50%, what's called a 50% inflow and infiltration rate, which means that 50% of what ends up at the plant is actually rainwater, groundwater, because we're an old community and our pipes are heavily damaged. And so we are not looking to expand the sewer service area. We're looking to fix the sewer service area that exists. It's really kind of not looking to kind of add sewer to where there's not sewer already. We're looking to, just like you would fix sidewalks, because if you don't, it becomes a hazard. If we don't kind of fix those pipes are going to continue to break over time, and that maintenance needs to occur. So that's why we're kind of putting the sewer, per our wastewater, our public works director, they've asked us to kind of put that in there because, we want to fix our sewer pipes, because we don't want to overtax our sewer plant.
Right. And again, I understand why we need the POCD plan. It makes perfect sense to me. I'm not arguing the PCOD plan. I'm most concerned about, I feel like it's being fast tracked through town planning and zoning now today versus more closer to the due date of 2026. And I'm very concerned to hear that you have not presented this to the Board of Ed when this could truly impact the redistricting process that they're in. And what's really important as a town as a whole, that all of these committees are talking to each other, because it's a domino effect. Conservation impacts town planning and zoning impacts, Board of Ed. And we need everyone to be communicating and understanding what the town plan is. So if you could please make it a point to go to the Board of Ed and discuss this with them, I would greatly appreciate it, because I do think this is going to greatly impact the redistricting plan. And I think that's something that people need to be aware of.
I just would add that the Planning and Zoning Commission saw essentially this entire plan 9 months ago at the joint meeting that we had with the Planning and Zoning Commission, Heather, this December 14th of last year. So all of this has been on the table for an extensive period of time. It's not as if anything's being fast-tracked or rushed through. I'm not to take away your point about us touching all the bases, we should do that. But I think in terms of any kind of discussion about fast-tracking, that's not happening.
I guess I'm concerned because it's 2026 and we're 3 years away from, or well, 2.5 actually, excuse me. And again, I'm just looking at how the impact could be for other areas. And I want to make sure that when we do something, we're doing something with the greatest care and understanding all the scenarios that could be impacted by this. So like I said, I personally have written a letter, and I've encouraged others to write letters to town planning and zoning, asking them to hold off on any type of voting on this, because I do feel that, as my personal opinion, that I'm like, why are we why is this all of a sudden, I mean, 9 months, okay, but why is this all of a sudden being put in front of everyone? And I just, that is a concern I have. And again, the Board of Ed with this redistricting, I think this would greatly impact the redistricting and the racial imbalance that we have within Fairfield. That's been a long-standing process, and I think we have to do our due diligence to make sure that we don't do something that's going to negatively impact something another committee's trying to fix.
Yeah, I just would say, Heather, that we have to look at the big picture too, and there are a lot of emerging trends that are very important that need to be addressed in town, so that while the Board of Ed situation is an important one, I think we need to be looking at the entire picture and look at how all the parts come together. So I don't think anybody's set a deadline for when this has to be signed off on, and that would be wrong to do that. So agree with you on that, but I think to just automatically put this off until 2026 with all of the major underlying demographic and sociological trends that are going on, might be an oversight as well. So.
And I'm okay with that, but then I would like to actually put it off until the redistricting has been resolved, and that's going to be resolved in the next few months, it's my understanding. But I think that we have to understand what our schools are going to look like before we create, a POCD plan. And also too, I'm very concerned. It's my understanding that we hired a consultant for $175,000, and the consultant has not gone to town planning and zoning to answer any questions I'm not even talking about public comment. I'm just talking about from the TBZ committee as well. That's a lot of town money. And so that's also, I find very concerning as well.
That's untrue.
Well, Heather,
Okay,
that's
correct me then.
Heather, he spoke at the December 14th meeting.
Yeah, it was there.
Was there a Q&A? Because I was told he did not answer Q&A.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then I absolutely stand corrected. Then I will go look for those agenda notes on the December 14th meeting.
It's really constructive if you could take a look at that video.
I will.
Maybe ask others to look at that video. But I think we have one question.
Yeah, and the April meeting, they made a very large presentation that was very heavily attended. The public was there, so,
Workshop.
Yeah, and just so you know, that covers 3 scopes of work. That covers the update to the POCD, updating our zoning regulations, and then implementing changes per the POCD within the zoning regulations and other things, frankly, that we want to update within the zoning regulations as well. So it just doesn't cover the POCD. It's a 3-pronged contract.
Okay, I will go ahead and take a look at those videos. Thank you.
I think we want to give you a quick question.
Just a quick observation regarding the redistricting. If I understand that the town has been struggling with that topic for 15 years, has not reached resolution, the latest Board of Ed meetings seem to me to indicate that they may ask for a possible delay or slow things down as they go back to the state. So it really may not be resolved for another year or two, and then they would build a plan around that, which would be another year or two later, and I really would question delaying things, because so much of the hard work that's gone into the existing plan and information would largely become stale at that point, and then all the hard work that's been done to study all these factors and issues wouldn't really be relevant that many future years out. So just
Okay.
We're never going to resolve the racial imbalance in Fairfield. It's just never going to happen. And it's a hot topic, and obviously this is not the meeting to debate it. But I did not hear that type of delay. But again, they've brought some scenarios back to the table that they had originally taken out. As you guys know, if you're following any type of social media, there's a huge parental presence at these Board of Ed meetings with a lot of different comments. It's not easy. It's painful, and I'm so glad I'm not on the Board of Ed right now. But again, I just feel that we have to take any type of redistricting scenario. If you read those scenarios, some of them are tough. They're really tough. And you just have to take everything into account, because again, our whole goal is to better our town. And I want to make sure that we are all working in conjunction for that, and making sure that, the right hand knows what the left hand's doing, so we can, better our town.
Wait, when we get to the affordable housing.
Yeah, I think we probably.
I know, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hijack.
So I'm just gonna quickly go through the next couple slides. For environmentally rooted community, this really speaks to some of the open space preservation, the conservation efforts that we have, expanding greenways, and then a community that is home for all. So what we did borrow, again, very heavily from the Affordable Housing Committee's fine work. We certainly appreciate our partnership and kind of looking at ways in which we can implement some policies within our POCD. So we are looking for more mixed-use opportunities, expanding missing middle opportunities, and then also promoting housing near transit facilities. I want to focus on some of the priorities because, again, we borrowed heavily from the work that we've done together. But I do also want to focus on the fact that, you know, again, 95% of Fairfield will remain exactly the same, zoned single family, exactly the way it is. So I really wanted to kind of take our zoning map, highlight that we're really talking about very discrete areas of Fairfield. We are not en masse changing Fairfield zoning, but we do feel like, you know, we have respondents who have said we want more walkable communities in Fairfield. So what does that mean? That means really looking at mixed-use housing opportunities, looking to expand the Center Design Business District west to the Mill River, which, by the way, incorporates design standards that are not available presently within our Design Business District. So we think it's better zoning, it's better architectural and design site standards that bring that to, especially the Exide site, which is, you know, a very large undeveloped parcel for us, you know, closest to the Mill River. The other thing that we're going to be looking at is also how we revise some of our Center Design Business District language to reduce the present height of 5 stories down to 4 stories, but increasing that ground floor height where and this is part of what is driven also off of our TOD study that was done in 2018, 2019, that we want readily convertible ground floor commercial from, say, restaurant to retail. And that 15-foot ground floor height allows us to be able to have a very diverse commercial ground floor that interacts with the street, and then residential above. And we're still kind of working through, and our hope is to work through with our consultant what that 4th story looks like, whether it's setback, articulated a bit differently, because we have heard from the public that there is a concern about, you know, higher height commercial particularly within the downtown area. So we're sensitive to that, but that'll be part of the zoning regulation phase. The other thing that we're looking at is, you know, in Fairfield, one of the things that people also strongly expressed to us is that we don't have enough condominiums. Condominiums were largely developed through our DRD overlay zone, the Design Residence District, and that was revised as a result of, I think, some of the condo developments that were done that made it more challenging for those developments to be landed within town. We are looking to review whether or not we should loosen some of those restrictions, because seniors and young people in particular have really strongly expressed a desire for more condominium options.
Timeline, is that a number of condos or the location of the condos?
It's kind of the minimum, where we kind of changed things that kind of turned off the spigot was the minimum lot size required. I mean, it was really kind of intended for, well, at least the way the language is written, it makes it almost impossible to land a DRD today because the minimum lot size requirements are so onerous, and the density that we allow doesn't really benefit that much. So I think we have to kind of look at what we feel is going to be acceptable in terms of mapping and size and that type of thing. But, you know, understanding that with condo developments, you generally end up with some open space around it that ends up for screening and all those different things. So that's TBD, but we've heard from you, we've heard from members of the public that this is where we need to move forward. We are also looking at potentially upzoning just a couple of places within the community where right now we feel like those neighborhoods could accept a little bit more density, again, around Metro Center, and one that is closest to downtown. But it's really just 3 very discrete areas, and I'm sure that the board will have lots of discussion on that. So thank you.
And as we've discussed, a number of these properties are already non-conforming.
Right.
They are.
They're already duplex.
They're already, or in the B2C zone, they're already 3-family or sometimes 4-family. So we don't think that this will create a lot of change now. But maybe in 15 years from now, when two houses next to each other are a bit tired, it allows for the consolidation of those parcels and maybe from two single families there to be a fourplex. So this is very gentle density. This is the middle housing, I think, that folks have really kind of spoken about. And that's what we're trying to achieve within the walkable distance of Metro Center. And then we are focusing, of course, on integrating that TOD study within our regulations. Some applicants have already done some of that work for us by, proposing zoning regulations as they've moved forward. But we still have a little bit of work to do. So that's the other discrete area that we're talking about. And then this is the area that is targeted for downzoning, which is, again, between Kings Highway and I-95, which is in the Rooster River floodway. So that's kind of what we're looking at. I think that kind of covers the housing-related issues. I can certainly answer any questions. I'll just go through the last few slides very quickly. Economic development is kind of the same. We really are looking at the commercial corridors. But one thing, that's all we have. It's 5% of our land area. We've got to make the most of it. The only thing that's a little bit unique and creative, and we'll see how our board responds to it, they've been kind of positive so far, but when we get into the nitty-gritty, we'll see how the conversation, what direction the conversation takes. But, we have been kind of looking very thoughtfully at the bus depot area up by GE. People complain a lot about traffic, and it's because we have very slender, everybody's trying to get to the same grocery store, right? All of Fairfield, all of it.
By that, don't mean creating a bus depot.
No,
Just how the-
we're looking at the bus depot to try to create like a little pocket commercial village. So we've had this conversation with Sacred Heart, who seems amenable. We have to turn around and have this conversation with the state, but I think it's something that warrants a planning study or a, specialized review to look and see, what the traffic is.
Where is the bus depot?
It's where they used to take like CT Transit from the train station up to GE.
Basically Jefferson, Easton
Yeah.
Turnpike. Easton Turnpike, there's a couple cutoffs
On
there.
both sides.
All right.
Both
State
sides.
It's both.
So just to cut up, there's no building there.
There's
No,
no building
there's no
there,
building.
but it could create a small little pocket.
Comparable to
commercial
Stratfield
area.
Village, right? I mean, the
Right.
land area is very similar,
Mhm.
but those become really
Like another
special,
small
Yeah.
gateway.
neighborhood serving, bagel shop,
Residential on
coffee
the second
shop,
floor.
Mhm.
so it becomes something that services that north area of town, so that they don't have to hike
Yeah.
down to go get a cup
Yeah,
of coffee.
the grocery store.
Right, so that's kind of one of the unique things that we're looking at. And then we are hopefully going to reexamine our parking standards, and our use categories to allow a little bit more flexibility from transition from one use to the next. I think we discussed. The internet-connected community, again, is building on our bicycle network, our sidewalk network. Hopefully, we are adding in the two major plans that were completed since the last POCD, which is the Black Rock Turnpike study, as well as the Post Road Circle study. Major areas for us, which represent a lot of crash data within our community that we hope to, be able to apply for funding to implement those projects. Lastly, a community where people come together. This was really kind of integrating the Parks and Recreation Master Plan into our POCD, so that hopefully some of those projects could come to fruition through grant writing opportunities. Just as a reminder, as I said, for us, the POCD, it does unlock both federal, state, and other funding pools. So, if we have missed projects, or if there are priority projects that we need to include, now is the time to include them. And that's all I have.
So there will be discussion at the next, the September 26th.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, that's correct. And our consultant will be there. But it's really for our commission. It is obviously, of course, a public meeting, but it's really kind of a working session for our commission to really start to talk through some of the priorities that we've indicated in the plan. For example, if they don't want to upzone B to C zones in those two very discrete areas, now's the time for us to understand it, so we can take it out of the plan. And that's just the way it works with the part of the planning process. We've heard from the general public as to what they feel strongly about, and we've kind of, we're never gonna achieve 100% consensus in a community of 60,000 people, but we feel like they've given us very specific direction on how to move forward. So that's what we've tried to implement within the POCD.
And the expectation is that the public will be able to comment at
At the actual public hearing to adopt. But at any point now, they can send us comments on the plan as well. We ask that they please send us comments about the content of the
Right.
plan, because that's really what we need to look forward to revising. You know, one of the other reasons why we really don't want to delay this is we have a lot of things that we'd like to work on within the town of Fairfield, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's sidewalks, whether it's, you know, grants for this, that, or the other. But the longer we delay updating our language, the less opportunity we have to unlock some of that future funding. So, you know, I just think that, you know, we'll be rewriting this plan again in 6 years, the way the cycle works. So it's, you know, it's an ongoing planning process, and 10 years goes by very quickly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we plan to talk about the ADU seminar, I guess, a little bit later, after Ray speaks.
I can stay as long as you need me to if you want to move
Does
to
that work?
somebody else.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect.
But so, Emmeline, if members of the Affordable Housing Committee wanted to give comments, are there particular sections of the POCD that you would want us to focus on?
I mean, I think for the things that we have discussed together, you know, both in terms of our Plan and Zoning Commission and the Affordable Housing Committee, parking standards has been one of them, and so that's within the section of sustainably prosperous, Fairfield. And then, of course, you know, a community that's home for all. I think those are both sections where we've really kind of, again, utilized some of the good information that you've provided to us to hopefully incorporate within the POCD.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So maybe we can, I guess, pivot to the item that.
Yeah, well,
Ray is going to,
I can kind of cue this up. Ray, come on up.
Come up.
Yeah, come on up.
So,
And so, lady, you can stay with us,
Ray's here, participate in our conversation. You know, a few years back, we had actually, well, let's back up. When we looked at introducing inclusionary zoning regulations and proposing some text amendments to include that, we had a very robust conversation around whether or not to provide some options like a payment in lieu or providing off-site development to satisfy those requirements. We decided not to for very good reasons. You know, not the least of which is, you know, as part of, integrated as part of development, as development occurs over time, you know, units are dispersed within the community as a whole. You get the benefit of those units as those developments move forward and as they're produced. So, you know, there was conversation. A couple of years back, we had looked at this again, specifically as it relates to the payment in lieu option and providing additional tools to the Planning and Zoning Commission at their discretion, to utilize that in lieu of providing units on site. And that was limited in our conversation. What I provided was the draft that we had discussed and actually provided to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Limited to just the affordable ownership units. And we had a particular case where there was quite a disparity, between what the market rate units were selling for, versus a unit, a development with HOA fees, and so there was concern about how sustainable that path was going forward and whether that was really a good. And so, to make a long story short, that did not go forward for a lot of reasons that I think members of this committee are well aware of. But that problem that we identified then still exists today. So we do have, most of the affordable, most of the inclusionary developments that we've seen have been rental, and there isn't as much of an issue with rental. But ownership presents its own unique challenges, and so, you know, I thought it would be helpful, and Chris had reached out, Ray, certainly, we've talked about it before, as to whether or not we should consider this, and again, provide the commission with discretion, additional tool in their toolkit to consider as an option. That's kind of why it's here, because I know, you know, you represent a development that we're
Done a bunch of them,
we're looking at, that possibly could be a condominium.
which is over the 10-unit development, so there would be a number of units required to be affordable. And again, we're looking at pretty, sales prices that, create some tension within those developments. So again, with that as a backdrop, I thought it would be worthwhile for us to have a conversation, invited Ray,
Yeah.
to join us.
One question, I'm sorry, so whose language is this?
This is language that I had put together.
Which we're comfortable with most of it. I think we do think one of the numbers is pretty high, is probably the
I think
highest
it's
in
too low.
Fairfield County. Couple of things that I would suggest, and I've been doing this 30 years, I try not to, tend to stay away from some of the 830Gs unless it's something that, you know, it's really in the right spot. And, but it's a reality of today. One of the things that I would think, and I don't know if we talked about it, Chris talked about it with you, is the payment in lieu, I would have it probably not apply to 8-30G applications. It'd probably be more,
It can't per the statute anyway.
right, but it'd be more
Yeah.
important where people are conforming to the town's regulations with regard to density, but you'd hate to see somebody bust your zoning, take advantage of the density, and then buy their way out of it. And you'll see what's happened a lot, you'll see, and I'm probably one of the bigger proponents of it, is you got a lot of 9-unit projects going in town. And you get a lot of 9 units because the smaller projects just can't absorb these,
That's a secondary issue, but we'll talk about that one later.
well, it is important though, and I gotta tell you, because you can't, there's a great, you know, we added 1,000 of regular apartment units. We've added, over by the new train station, but that serves a certain marketplace. The ability for people who have lived their lives in Fairfield to want to downsize in Fairfield, or people who have, we've seen, I'm one of the owners of the Anchorage, is people who want to, if we could have sold every unit in that 5 times over. People who want to keep a connection to Fairfield, even though, or people who they live in New Jersey, but their kids and grandkids are in Fairfield, and they spend half the time in Florida, but they don't want the maintenance of a house, the ability to, the payments that are required, the efforts that are required of a single-family home. What happens is when you have these smaller projects, they're not as well funded. They tend to run on a very tight schedule of, their budget for their common charges are typically, what's the snow plowing, what's the landscaping, what's the insurance, and they run at a very, break-even kind of effort, which is all fine until you get roof leaks or you get unanticipated consequences. We have a project at 28 units, which our family was involved in Long Island, where there was a $75,000 assessment. Now, these smaller projects, you don't see it in the first 2 years, but as things happen, or you get shoddy construction or whatever happens, the people who are in the affordable units won't be able to afford any kind of, or they shouldn't be able to afford any kind, because they meet a certain guideline, any kind of large assessments. You don't see it in the 100 or 200 unit projects because they spread those costs all over. But when you have anything from 10 to 50, the condominium charge, they run a very tight number. They try and keep it down as much as possible. And whenever you have any kind of capital outlay, there's not a lot of places to spread around, and they really never have a huge reserve. We think this, once your housing trust fund has been established, we're grabbing some money out of building permit fees. There is ways that we believe that it could be better used, that the fund could get larger to provide, a truly 100% affordable housing options where you don't have these issues of disparate pricing, disparate ability to carry their units. Mark's was, I think, 320%, suggestion was 300% of the median income, which is like $103,000, which would be a $320,000 buyout, which is probably heaviest, one of, the- if not the heaviest in Fairfield County. And the other towns like Darien or New Canaan are similar, have much,
Significantly undervalued, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Yeah.
what's that?
They're significantly undervalued, because the intent here, from the committee's standpoint, is raising enough money that they could create that unit
Correct.
someplace else. You can't do that with $50.
No, I don't want to suggest it, but I think if it were something, say, that was equal to whatever,
And again, the other option would be just simply, I
build
mean,
them.
it wouldn't have to be imposed. I mean, certainly the developer could suggest that the commission consider this as an option, and the commission could agree, but I doubt that the commission would necessarily impose it without the developers.
What I would,
Otherwise,
yeah.
it's like creating the units as part of the overall development.
Yeah, well, I
They
would,
have to make the decision as to
Right.
whether or not it's in their best interest to buy it out, or, you know, go ahead and create the unit in, as part of the overall.
one of the costs, maybe one of the things that would be in between, what some of the towns are low, $50,000 doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But you have the issue of where a unit, the maximum sales price could be $240,000.
Yeah.
That, for purposes of a
I can't-
buyout,
The problem is you can't actually create a unit for 200. I mean, yes, we have to sell the unit at $240,000 in order for it to be affordable. What it's gonna cost, that is the crux of the issue. I think this committee now fully understands, done the numbers, we were working on Habitat. Habitat's a great example. We bought the land at $230,000, added to the town property that we already have. Even at that, you know, the hard cost alone can't underwrite the project without subsidy. We're donating the property. So if you add land, plus your soft costs, plus your hard costs, you're talking a significant cost that can't be underwritten by the development that we're talking about, these smaller developments. If you're doing 830Gs or projects that have hundreds of units, sure, you can spread that out.
Right.
And market rates to cover the offset the difference, no
but it
problem.
works in the rental situation.
But it doesn't work on the affordable ownership unit unless you have somebody that's underwriting in some.
Yeah, I mean, you have the one bedrooms in, you know, in the upscale apartment buildings
Even if
here
you
that are
wanted to
leased.
go buy a unit someplace, a condo in town, you'd be hard pressed to find anything like to try and restrict. I think that's, and the 320 actually, in all, let's be honest here, that number, we backed into that formula based on what was negotiated, if you will, for a particular project as a potential buyout. That was acceptable to that particular developer, and we came up with a formula that made sense going forward. It never happened for other reasons, but, you know, I think there's probably people on this committee that would think 320 is probably a little skinny, because in reality, even at the 350, 350,000 or whatever it works out to be, you'd be hard pressed to create the unit there. But to your point, it's a balancing act, because we don't want to unduly burden or penalize a developer such that the project won't go forward, but we do want to get some benefit to the town so that we can actually accomplish the mission.
What happens if it gets too high, those projects, just those mid-sized projects, which are, there's great demand for, and you've heard about that in the POCD, they just won't happen, because
Well-
you can't absorb these numbers in smaller projects. So, and believe me, I know it, that's, you know, because you look at it and you say to the guy comes into your office and says, hey, I can get 12 units here. I go, well, don't bother building 12, because
Yeah, you've ended up with something less than.
you're gonna have to put 2 in there, you're better off just building 9. And,
We've revised the inclusionary provisions.
but the problem becomes, if you,
Lower.
you do want that, it gets, the
No,
lower,
we wanna-
the lower,
we wanna-
the lower,
we
the
wanna
lower you
create-
get, the lower you get
Yeah.
in density, the harder it gets.
Sure.
So, I mean, 10, you're basically building, you know, you got 10, you've gotta build, you're a loser on one, you gotta build another one, you probably make money on 7 by the time you've built for 10.
What if you were able to pay an in lieu for the incremental unit? What if that were, so if you're building 12, buy 1, you provide the payment for the incremental. Does that help a developer?
So in other words, right now, it's 10 is 1, 11 is 2.
Mm-hmm.
Not if it's $350,000, it doesn't. That's the problem,
That's
because,
another question.
because at that point, you,
Yeah, you
what
wouldn't
you end
be-
up, what
you
you
wouldn't
really
be-
end up having is people are gonna build 9, 10, 19 or 20.
Right.
They're gonna,
Sure.
you just,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense, and so,
Well, the other way is it could be, you know, right now, it's not less than, so you round up to the,
Mhm.
you could set
Yeah.
a formula whereby.
Some towns
you
do
deal with
that.
Incrementals.
they
Right.
round up from,
When you're talking about money, it's a little bit more, it's easier to calculate based on a precise or decimal point.
Yeah.
That, if you want to necessarily.
Somebody else jump in?
Yeah, you're the guy.
I'm not, we're the Affordable Housing Committee. So philosophically, I'm just, this number, the 320% or 350%, much better. Because it's gonna cost more than that, it's gonna cost at least as much.
You hate these.
But philosophically, I'm just opposed to allowing the fee in lieu because, we're gonna get money and it's gonna, as happens often in Stanford, it's just gonna sit because you can't find the land. And if we don't allow the buyout, the fee in lieu, then you're gonna get the units dispersed throughout the community, which I think is better. And so, just because we don't have the land and, it's better to disperse it throughout the community, I don't like the fee in lieu at all. But if it was gonna be done, it'd be a hefty number.
Although I will say that we've been doing a pretty good job of spending money so far.
I do think it's important if you're looking, it was nice to listen to to hear Emmeline talk, because that's doing real estate, that is the sweet spot in this town. People want the cluster housing. For example, they love the area, off South Pine Creek, the Meadows. Projects like that can be community developed, but nobody's gonna build those if they can't, if they have such a strong, a strong requirement of affordability in those programs. And it does make it very difficult for the person who's in there to, after the first couple of years, to keep up, because what ends up happening, the common charge, developer will keep the common charge as low as he can to sell his units. Then the reality comes in, and especially with insurance costs in a shoreline area, insurance costs are doubling and tripling on all of these, shoreline areas that are stick-built. So, person who's in there meeting the guidelines can't absorb the real cost of actually owning the unit after the first year. And then it becomes a hardship. You can't, so what ends up happening, they don't pay. They get a lien put on the property. The lien comes in front of a bank because it's a condominium charge lien, and then you end up with nothing but a mess. And you either get a bank owning a project.
With frequency?
What's that?
Is this really happening with frequency, right?
We only have one development.
No, is it happening now? No, but what's happening now in your, and you'll see in your aging condominiums is the large capital expenses. We don't have a lot of that product in town. There's the demand for it, but without the ability to buy out of it, or without the ability to, the mid-sized condominiums, meaning 10 to 50,
Yeah.
are very difficult to make happen. You have, I forgot, how many do you do in Oldfield?
I
Probably
did
did
eight.
Eight, yeah. And so you're gonna have 8 and 9s, you're gonna have 8 and 9s,
I think that was originally 12.
yeah,
That was
Yeah.
an 830G though.
It was, yeah.
right. But, Reef Road, I did
Right.
both those applications for a guy.
Yeah.
And you
Okay.
got two 9-unit projects, because you're gonna have, you know, and there's
Nine
a,
is the magic number.
there's
It
a
is.
great demand,
It is.
there is a great demand for it.
9 lot subdivision.
Yeah.
But-
Ray, do you have a different number besides 320% or 350?
200%.
200.
We thought 200 was a fair number. I'm getting the sense from the commission, and I understand Mark's
No.
thought of it,
I'm the only one who talked.
that, the idea would be that you give us the money then to replace the housing. Don't give us a number to contribute, because then we're really not getting, it's not really a fee in lieu, it's a partial fee in lieu. Is that basically what you're kind of getting at? Because you'd have to pay off two to be able to buy one yourself.
Well, that's what I've heard before, and it addresses Steve's point, which is, you know, you're banking the money and then not actually creating the unit. That was a concern, right? Which is why they tried to make it so that it was closer to actually creating the unit. It's still probably not enough, but it would be, I don't know, let Earth and Bob and Heather talk.
I mean, we have been on a bit of a roll lately in terms of being able to find these Greenfield Street type. You've done a great job. Well, that's one, but I mean, there are other ones that we've looked at, and so maybe there will be more opportunities to spend this, but it sounds like we're talking about a couple different problems here, right? One is the round-up issue.
Right.
And the other one is how tight these smart communities are in terms of the way they're financed.
Correct.
Initially. So there are really two things that are aggravating this.
100%. 100%. And when you have this disparity of, you know, people get in there and if they paid $1.2 million for their condo and all of a sudden they want gates, they want security, one guy says, hey, $20,000, no problem, I spent $1.2 million. $20,000 to a guy who spent $216,000 is a whole different animal.
I think we all appreciate the fact that when you've got these expensive units,
Yeah.
there really is a problem.
Yes.
It's almost an inequity.
Right.
To put somebody in that development at an affordable rate.
And I think when you get up there, then you'll be able to absorb, as you get more density, you'd be able to absorb the number kind of Mark is talking about, because you're now spreading it amongst more units. And I do think excluding 830G would be, I think you have to do it, but I think it's important anyway.
I think we recognize that there's a problem. Don't set people up for failure. Really a question of
It's also
balancing
an inequity.
right?
I mean, you know, why should that person get a windfall versus someone who's going in $300,000?
And I gotta tell you, it ends up being the biggest, we did at the Anchorage, we have 9 affordable units. And I think we got a waiting list that can go out to.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah, there's no
You know,
problem with rental.
You know, so it really becomes when you're going, but the rentals, you can absorb them when you have 90 units. Very, very tough to absorb because all your overall costs end up becoming cheaper. And especially with, there's a real strong, I can't tell you how many people are asking, where can we want a townhouse, we want a first floor townhouse, we want to live here, we want to be here 6 months, we're in Florida part of the time, our grandkids are here. And that's the part of the market that Greenwich has taken a huge advantage of. Stanford, you know, other towns are taking big advantage. New Canaan's at least done a lot of that within the town. And it feeds a lot into these areas that people want walkable, they want serviceable,
And I think the other thing the committee would prefer, and I'm sure a lot of people in the committee would prefer, is smaller projects anyway that are into the neighborhoods in which they're situated.
And the real fact of the matter
You don't want
is.
100-unit condominium development. You want something that's contextual to the neighborhood.
Correct.
So, you know, we want to create a situation in which that can happen, because not everyone wants a rental unit. It's been popular, but you can feel like there's now, you know, or always has been, a demand for maintenance-free living, condominium type.
And here's where it's kind of not fair. When you have these type of projects, if you have a 20-lot subdivision, there's no affordable requirement. Right?
There is.
There is.
You got to even have a 20-lot subdivision.
Anything after 10, over 10.
Anything over
That's our.
Which,
That's what
yeah, which I think which almost makes that impossible. I would never, I mean, who's gonna,
Well, you know, we get 9-lot subdivisions, what do you know?
Yeah,
that's what you're gonna get. You get a lot of 9-lot subdivisions.
Or at least, as presented, 9 lots.
Well, I think it's
Whether we believe it or not.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so our feeling is that you really need, this would really help, first of all, fund the town. I think you'd have a lot more project, you would what you think you're losing in, you'd gain in money, and I think people would be more inclined to do the projects that would give you this money versus everybody staying below the threshold.
My recollection, Herb, is that you guys, I thought it was Steve, but I know we looked at communities that had a payment in lieu option.
Right.
We looked at their formulas.
Yep.
And we had that analysis.
Yep.
But I don't recall where that went. So,
No.
do you guys have it? Because, you know, Ray is correct.
Yeah.
Our proposal is definitely, you know, more in line.
Fair, ours is more fair.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of them were laughably, you know, inadequate.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, New Milford's $10,000. New
Yeah, there
Milford's
was
like
a lot,
crazy.
when we looked at it, we were like, geez, you know,
New
what's
Canaan.
the point of this?
Right?
New Canaan's at like 300%.
Yeah.
And so is Darien.
There were a couple that were
There were a
close.
couple that were close, so.
Yeah.
And Darien told us that they basically weren't approved, that they wanted units.
Yeah.
Right.
That's been the philosophical issue
Yeah.
within the community, which is, you know, our preference would be to create the unit
Of
at
course.
the time which the development is made. First within the community, but we recognize that ownership does present a unique set of challenges.
Right.
Well, what if, let me ask a question. So what if in lieu, instead of doing it in lieu, if in your scenario, if you did a 20-lot subdivision, what if you were required to donate one of those lots to Habitat? Or to the town? Would that satisfy a developer?
No, we still have the same issue of who's gonna carry it.
Well,
Would be
if it's
separate.
a subdivision.
Yeah, they would take it out,
Yeah, in a subdivision, you would take it out, but you
not
wouldn't,
like open space.
yeah.
but-
Right. And then the town,
I mean, this was part of a broader, you know, the way we envisioned this, to the extent to which it would be used, was it was giving tools to the commission, to make a judgment call as to what was in the public interest at that time, based on that particular. It certainly could allow for off-site units and things of that nature, but again, always kind of opted for the simplicity.
Well, I'll tell you,
Was better.
maybe one thing that you could do if you have a problem with
You
it
could.
is
Well, it's a land problem,
add to the reg a referral from the a referral from the,
We would hope that they would.
from the Affordable Housing Commission. Well, they may have situations where they don't want it. I don't know. But it certainly does make a lot of sense in,
Right in the
where,
middle.
where it's
Timeline's
disparate.
comment, though, that if you had somebody else come in as the owner, like, could be Habitat, it could be the Housing Authority, they could own the unit and they could rent the unit out. Not quite the same way that happened on Westway, but similar, you know, that you'd have affordable units.
cash condos are hard. I think,
It's
for
easier to
subdivision.
imagine it with a
It's easier to
subdivision where
imagine
you're
it with a
taking a
subdivision.
lot and you're saying,
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
at it.
Cut
But
it
in
out.
a condo, I don't know how you would do that.
No.
You'd still be subject
It
to
wouldn't
the
work.
HOA fee.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, but then you've got an entity that's supposed to.
You have an entity, right, but,
which is almost worse. Have another entity within a housing community, and it would seem to me that the money situation or a substitute property. So for example, if I can buy a single family for $400,000 that has, and donate to, not even donate to town, deed restrict it and collect the rent off of that versus, then you get your unit. The developer's gotta go find the piece and buy something, deed restrict it, 2 or 3 bedroom. And in that instance, you're getting your unit and you're not having the,
or if you
and,
get,
and then keep in mind, this is in situations where there is no density bonus. So it's kind of a, huh?
not yet. I mean, some of the things that have been talked about with the POCD is looking at our DRD regs and going back kind of in time to when condos were more popular and allowing for, you know, we're not talking significant density, but it certainly makes these things feasible. And I think most people would say, looking at those projects, not knowing what the density of it, that's perfectly compatible with the neighborhood which it's. But we've kind of dialed it back to the point that Emmeline was making earlier, such that none of those projects can really go forward.
Like, I have a client that it's looking at like a 20-unit project adjacent to a commercial area. that would give rise to maybe units that are worth $600,000 or $700,000, but now you throw 320 in the middle, and what happens?
Well, no, but you wouldn't have to. You could, if there weren't, it's only where you have such a huge disparity. You know, we've got the one case that we're familiar with, you had market rate units selling for 1.2 and up, and you had affordable units selling for $200,000, and you
Right.
had the common charges associated with that. And yeah, that's an issue. That's an issue for, you know, long term. I think we've created a little ticking time bomb here. It might be fine the first couple of years, but
It's just, again, it's not fair. It's not fair that we're giving affordable, we're giving it kind of a windfall.
and then in 40 years, you know, I guess somebody who's left holding it, they can just flip that, I suppose.
Well, I think what you're gonna see is, in those instances where it's expensive, you'll have developers just hold on to it, rent them,
Well, that's what we have.
put it in a family trust, and in 40 years, they becomes a forced savings.
That's not accomplishing our goal either,
Right.
so. But in the other instance where you have a not as great a disparity, you know, probably then they wouldn't say, I'll just create the unit.
Correct.
You know, if I'm gonna sell them for $500,000-$600,000, and sell the affordable at 200, you know, I can cover that. Doesn't make any sense.
So we would strongly hope that the commission would, obviously, you're gonna pick the number. I get a real sense of where the number, that there's some relation to that you're replacing a unit with equal value, so,
Yeah.
or as close to equal value. And remember, the guy's then gotta pay also on the permit fees too, so he's gonna
Yeah.
be contributing
Yep.
to bring that number up. So, we think it's very important, and I don't think there's a big downside to it. I really don't.
Well, there wouldn't be an inclusionary zoning.
Because they're paying a fee and.
You're already creating,
Right.
contributing in a different way.
Right.
So it wouldn't
The only
be-
other
We wouldn't
question
do
would,
it twice.
the only other thing would be that is it, and I don't have it, I was filling in for Chris, but is there the ability to substitute property offsite?
And that wasn't
Not
in his
presently.
language either, but, you know, it's something that I think the committee would wanna talk about. We had talked about that in that context too, with the Planning and Zoning Commission about, you know, creating units and providing those in lieu of.
We almost did that, I think, with the West.
We almost did, yeah. And it fell apart. It was a good trade, because I think we were talking about a 7-for-2 exchange, which was really good.
Well, I mean, if you could get a guy, rather than.
So I create 7 affordable units for 2 market rate units.
Right.
I mean, it obviously worked to his benefit, because otherwise he wouldn't have proposed it, but, you know, from our standpoint, carrying 7 units is 7 units. It's
Right.
5 more than we would have had otherwise, so. I think that was a fair exchange. I do think there has to be probably more than a 1-to-1 exchange when you're doing off-site units. The concern that we heard back from the commission was, well, the units you're giving us are not in the same geographic vicinity. They're less valuable to us. We want them to be in this zip code. We don't want them to be across town. And there's some validity to that. But, you know, that's hard to do sometimes. Aren't available at the time. That's why it went down, but it's definitely something I think the committee should weigh and consider.
Did this discussion come up because there's a project being proposed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a
Trey's
project,
got a project at 250
it's
Pequot.
250 Pequot, it's gonna be, receive the support of the community. People would like to see that, people wanna live in that, you know, right there,
Is that
it's
18 or 20?
18.
18.
And, it's gonna run into this same problem where,
Our preference is to address this prospectively
Sure.
as opposed to after the
Sure.
fact.
yes,
But working around a project that's already being envisioned, I think helps maybe work towards a solution.
Right, you have.
so I'll give you a hypothetical. You got 18 units built in that'll probably sell, I would think, for over $1 million. And you're gonna have this same issue where you're gonna have a level of expectation of services, amenities, that's gonna be very high, level upkeep, where you could have common charges that end up to be, almost $1,000 a month, which, when you have, which wouldn't, at a price of that level, is not,
No taxes taxes.
without taxes, just your common charges for landscaping, cleaning, amenity services, everything else could be $1,000 a month. Now, you got somebody that's gotta now pay the $1,000 a month, and in the event there's any type of capital call where the people who paid the $1 million can write a check for $20,000, but you got somebody who's stretching now to pay a mortgage, qualify for their mortgage, $1,000 a month common charge, and then gets hit with a capital call. So it gets to be the point where it doesn't, it becomes a real problem.
Yeah, the capital call hopefully wouldn't come for 15 years or so, but
Oh, I would think, you know, I know they did a decent sized one on Westway.
Yeah, because people had, you know, again, different visions of what, you know, the community in which they were living in. That, again, people paying $1.2 million, money's not much of an issue. So if they want
Certainly not the same
higher
issue.
level of amenities, then, you know, they were willing to
So we,
pay up for that.
in this instance, it would be a big, it's almost one of these things that rock a project, whether you can do it or not. And this is just the exact type of project where it's gonna be, 18 units, all on one floor, you know, perfect for people who wanna stay in Fairfield, be in an area where they can walk to the housing we all talked about. But you have this dichotomy of putting an affordable unit in there that doesn't really make sense.
could we do something, just looking at you, Emmeline, without it becoming a precedent, without the town being stuck with it in the future? Could we try to craft a solution for a development, maybe this development, that wouldn't lock us into something and would give us some time to see how it really works?
Do that without,
No,
you know,
not-
you have
not
to comply
without-
with your regulations.
Yeah, so really the only way that they do that now is through litigation and settlement agreements,
Mhm.
which I would hope we wouldn't end down that path, but, you know, our commission as a regulatory agency
Well, you
has
gotta
to
remember,
follow.
this would not be an this is not an 830G
Exactly.
application, so it wouldn't even go by the way of litigation.
Well, it
Unless it
could if-
became an
if-
830G
if- Well, it
application.
could if for whatever reason,
Yeah.
you know, but for our commission, we have to follow the law.
Mhm.
And if the law doesn't give the opportunity for that flexibility or creativity or discretion specifically indicated within the zoning regulations, we don't get to waive a standard. We're not the zoning board of appeals as the Plan and Zoning Commission. So we have to be very careful because case law has, you know, has shown that we don't get to waive things or be creative unless that opportunity is specifically authorized within your regulations.
Well, maybe if you specifically authorized it with, but based on an affirmative referral from the Affordable Housing
But we
Commission.
would have to
That
have
would
that
be,
built
yeah, but I'm
into our-
saying that
yeah.
would give these folks
No,
the ability,
that's a good, that's
Yeah.
the ability to,
I mean,
you gotta present your case here
honestly, I
Right.
think.
as a prerequisite to even making the application to
I
the
think
P and
planning and
Z.
zoning would probably welcome.
Yeah, I think they're looking for more flexibility in terms of how
Maybe-
to achieve what everybody thinks is the goal, which is to provide more affordable units within Fairfield.
And maybe if that becomes the prerequisite, then you guys have the ability to say, you know what, that works, I think this is one we'll try. Where you might say in another instance,
Regulations can be, you know, amended, they can be
Mhm.
changed later on.
Mhm.
You can go through, you can try it, doesn't work, you can change it later. I mean,
well, that's what I was just thinking, where the board will not have as much discretion as I think a referral.
I don't.
But you
think
still
that's-
need to have
the legal authority to
enabling
be able to.
authority.
No, you put, but if it's in the regulation,
Yeah.
that you need a
I
positive.
don't think that you, as a Plan and Zoning Commission, I don't think that you can give another advisory agency the authority that you have by statute. I don't think you have the ability to do that. But I think you can build in options that our Plan and Zoning
Upon-
Commission
upon-
can act on.
Okay.
So I think you provide those alternatives.
It's not a bad suggestion.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to think for that middle ground.
no, I know.
When you're doing
I know.
dip
I
your,
agree.
you wanna dip your toe in the water, but
But
you don't
but
wanna,
if
you don't wanna
If
take
it
a
weren't
full
this
dive.
particular project, there are a couple others that we're talking about.
Yeah,
that
where I
would-
think we need options.
So I
Yeah.
think this issue has been festering for a bit, and we probably need to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Not to, you know, I didn't put this
This is not
on
the only
with the
project
idea
that's
that you
come up.
guys were gonna.
Right?
Oh, I know that, I've got a
I
couple.
think we probably need to move on tonight, so
Yeah.
I think it's something
Yeah.
we can tee up for early,
Yep,
very
next
early.
meeting or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe what I'll do is we'll work with Mark and Emmeline
Mhm.
maybe to see if we can come up with some kind of, reg that would make it, give you the level of comfort that it's not just a full
Sure.
dive in off the high dive and hope everything goes right.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
time, I really do.
Appreciate
I
it.
appreciate it. Thanks.
Mark, can I see it?
Huh?
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Yes,
Yes, we can, sorry.
Yeah.
It'd be worse if we did,
Yeah.
What's Ray's last name?
Ray Rizzio, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, right. And what was the address on Pequot?
250.
It's the office building right now.
Yeah.
They've gone through, ZBA, haven't presented the CP.
Right.
So, you know, this is the issue that's,
I think they had to go before WPCA first.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that it's solely this. It's
Right.
couple other steps. A long time in discussions.
Mark, can you just, for, Jackie and I, tell us where on Pequot that is?
250.
I know, but
It's
in,
what's it called?
It's in, Southport Center.
Southwood
Yeah,
Village.
Yeah, it's
As
across
you
from
head
the
up-
pharmacy, right?
It's a hard.
Yeah.
Chase at Five Corners.
There you go.
Directly opposite Sammy's,
I think it's the first building up.
First
Is that where Chase Bank is at?
No, there's two, no, sorry, it's the second building.
Yeah.
You have Chase Bank, 200, then 250.
Okay.
So it's the second office building coming up. And it used to be the one that was
The challenge, the Connecticut challenge.
Connecticut
Connecticut
Challenge,
Yeah.
right by the railroad track.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we've picked a time, a week at least.
Well, I was making sure that I have that date, so.
November 13th.
So we were thinking, November 13th.
Well, we had it November 14th last year.
That's why, this would be the anniversary, the first and the second annual.
The same Monday. And, it would be after the election,
Yep.
and,
And the preference would be to do it at the same locale.
I think so.
Mhm.
That was a really good,
That
it
was the
worked well.
museum?
Fairfield
Yeah,
Museum.
yeah, that was
Really,
great, I
it's a
think,
good-
yeah.
It was a good venue.
Yeah.
We'd have a similar format, panelists.
And we're thinking Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, I would presume.
We
Well,
can't do Tuesday, it's the Plan and Zoning Commission.
Well, that's right.
so we were thinking Monday.
we were thinking
could do Monday.
actually the Monday.
Yep.
It may be an easier day of the week to schedule this.
Monday night football.
Number one would be Monday.
Right, number one would be Monday, yep.
And then, so if we get the place locked in, that's the key driver, or are we looking for panelist availability first?
I don't know that we'll have a problem getting panel, I think we get the date, and then we can start, casting a net for panelists.
Answer.
Because then we'll have a date to
So
propose
Bob
to
has
them.
in mind
I already have an individual who, is well on his way, as a result of last year's session. He wasn't there, but, he's a good friend, he watched the video afterwards, and that prompted him, it's the Fitzpatrick's on Marchmere. So they're well underway, they'll be fully constructed by the end of this year.
So he'll be the town.
He would be, yeah.
So this is one of the 9, Emmeline, we're talking, so 9
Yeah.
have gone through, the ZBA, beginning of this
Yeah.
year, and been
Yeah.
approved.
His plans exceeded, I think it was 44% rather than 40, so he
Oh,
needed, he
okay.
had to go around to every neighbor, did
Mhm.
all that. And they're really pleased, because it allows their daughter and son-in-law and, 2 kids to then occupy the main house, and
Okay.
Phyllis and Jim can.
And then I presume you would want Emmeline or Jim.
I would want Emmeline, not Jim, but no, only.
She's here.
Oh. I would say that if Jim were here, only, so that we get diversity. We had Jim last year, he was great, and it would be as great this year. But I'd like to mix it up. If we had a program with 4 unique panelists, different from last year, then, it would not appear that we're running the same show.
Do you think he's still a realtor and an architect? You think he's some
I would like to get
builder or?
a builder, I'd love to get a builder, love to get a builder. I don't know that we need an architect, the builder could talk to the architect side of it. I think the realtor was a plus last year, especially given the way the market is. This has gotta be an increasingly appealing option for folks, just given how many folks are stuck. So, yeah, I think a realtor or a builder ideally, Emmeline, the Fitzpatricks, I would moderate as I did last year. It would be the same format, essentially. We'd run the same, drill in terms of the press release, Brenda's, biweekly,
Easy to do.
the flyer in public locations, Fair TV if they're available,
Yep.
tape, cookies in the back.
Yep.
I think it was a 7 o'clock start, I don't recall.
I think
We'd
7
even
o'clock.
keep the title from last year, because it worked really well for us, so,
Okay.
unless you wanna be very creative. And we'll just run the same drill as we did before. We'd have the brochures there available.
We didn't record it though, did we?
I thought we did.
Oh, we
No,
did.
we did. It was recorded. And that's how Jim,
That's right,
Fitzpatrick
we
saw it.
did, we got through.
We did get Fair TV to record it. It was not live broadcast.
Yep.
And we gave each panelist 10 minutes, to prepare, and they really stuck to it. I really appreciated that. We had a good, productive, 30-minute Q&A, which went right up to the end. So, I think this will have as much of an interest,
The only thing we've talked about, I know you guys have shared some thoughts, but, it would be, you took a slightly different tact, I appreciate, in terms of survey. We talked about doing a survey.
Oh, right.
A community survey for ADUs, and your approach was looking at folks that are actually building it and the experiences that they've had.
Or might be.
Which is a good thing, and maybe we wanna target the people that have been approved or recently constructed.
Yeah.
We can ask them a specific, survey related to their experiences, so we understand, what issues they
Sure.
may have encountered, if at all.
Yeah.
I was thinking of it more broadly in the sense of understanding community's awareness around ADUs, and then, if they have considered ADUs, what has prevented them
right.
from moving forward? Are there impediments or things that we could then take in
Sure.
and create actionable
Yes.
steps to resolve those issues? So,
I think
in
that's.
any event, it might be helpful as we do marketing to launch a little survey.
Yeah.
And then that might provide some
It could.
fodder for
Yep.
you to talk about some of those issues up front in terms
Yep.
of people's knowledge of ADUs
Sure.
and what it is.
And if we had a five question one-pager for each of the attendees,
Yep.
as another way to survey.
Yep.
You're here because you have an interest, and then it's a leave behind. They can anonymously complete that.
We don't need to use these, but these are the questions that I had,
You would pass it around, or?
Or I
Yeah,
wasn't
these
sure
are
who.
Cool.
these are the ones that we had, so we don't need to go in this direction.
Right.
We can, or we
Yeah.
can do both.
Yeah.
So Bob, could we do a survey by, like, a little postcard that we might hand out at the congregations around town, or,
Sure.
senior center, and 3 or 4 questions, check a box, and
We could. The issue oftentimes with that is, whether or not it's prepaid postage.
just
And
have
that
a
gets
box to toss
expensive.
it in.
Oh, a box,
Somebody's gotta go collect it, and
That's,
then you gotta tabulate it, and.
yeah, well, that's,
I don't think it's not insurmountable. We clearly
No.
had, when we did surveys before, we did paper
Yeah.
surveys at like the housing authority.
yeah, it can be done. It's very analog.
I will say that I'll take off my Fairfield hat and put on my, Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association hat. We were very interested to see how communities statewide were, how they had chosen to implement or not implement the state statutory requirement for ADUs. Desegregate Connecticut, it actually surveyed many, many towns, and they're gonna be doing a webinar, I think, coming up on the
I
21st.
saw that, yes, 21st.
Yeah, so I don't know whether they're gonna get into the
They've got
nitty-gritty.
two actually coming up,
whether-
20th and the 21st.
Yeah, whether there's gonna be anything kind of creative that we could
Yeah.
look to that would help us in terms of our regulations, but I know that they did call me to say, well, how many have you guys done? And
Right.
so they asked very kind of similar questions, I think, that you
Yeah.
folks have also asked. So I'd be interested to see, you
So,
know,
excuse
does
me,
that have
they
effect?
ask how many we've done. We've done like 9, it sounds like. Do you have
Well,
any
we've done,
reference?
we've done more than that. We've actually done, so 9 got variances.
These were 9 variants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so the other towns, how do we fit in? Are we doing better than the other?
I don't know until they kind of do their presentation, to be honest.
Well, you look at Stanford, I mean, they've only recently
I would say-
any
I would say
ADU
we're doing
legislation,
well.
so they're like
Yeah.
at zero.
Relative to others, I think
Yeah.
we're doing well.
We're doing well compared to many communities.
I mean, when I've participated in a couple of these conferences or workshops and asked to comment on ADUs, and when I provide the statistics for Fairfield, most people are like,
Yeah.
that's pretty, I think,
Oh.
I mean, we've been doing it a while, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, yeah.
But, you know, I think one of the things that we've wrestled with, which is why I was thinking, like, during the survey, is we've wrestled with, well, is it cost? Is that a
Right.
barrier? Should we provide incentives to encourage people to
Right,
create
right.
ADUs?
Yeah,
But, you know, without knowing what's the
Right.
impediment,
Yep.
it's hard to fashion a solution to that. Is it regulatory? Is it not being aware of the regulatory changes that we've made? So then it's a marketing question, you know, creating and doing engagement, building awareness around some of this, kind of like this workshop.
yeah.
Kind of a little struggling in the dark. It's not like we do scientific surveys, we kind of throw it up there. But I thought it might be a
Yeah.
good
And
precursor to this.
We do have the
workshop.
email addresses, we get them, we would use Eventbrite again to register,
Yep.
so we'll have emails. We
Yep.
still have the emails from last year. So
Yep.
that's a survey poll too.
True.
To go back, you know, it's been a
We'd
year.
ask 'em.
Have you-
And I would post on the website and direct traffic to it.
Right, yeah,
Have people fill out SurveyMonkey survey, and,
sure,
you know, you could have it 2 tiers where people have actually done it, and you're asking them separate questions.
exactly, yeah.
But that's complicated.
I don't know how to build that survey.
We have to ask Herb, you know, develop a pivot table.
I think that's it. Anything else on the?
Well, just in terms of publicity, what we want to do in terms of,
Yeah, I'd wanna run the same,
If,
we did
it's
last year.
easy, I have all that,
Yeah,
so.
the
it's fairly
press
easy to
release,
Just run it out.
it was
the
a
same
select-
thing we did last
yeah.
year.
and it worked, it filled the room, so,
Yeah, and I don't remember any real issues or other issues with it, it seemed to go pretty smoothly.
yeah, yeah.
Mark, I'd say if we could get maybe even 2 prompts in the
Yep,
newsletter.
I don't think that'll be an issue.
terrific
Sure,
if we could
like we
get
did
2 of
last time, yep.
And how do we get the reporters there?
I could, we just send out a press invitation, yeah.
Sure.
I mean, some of these guys are looking for content.
Yeah, yeah.
I will confirm.
So if you could check with the.
Venue and
Yeah,
date,
venue,
and finalize that, and then if we can come up with a builder maybe, and,
yeah, that would be terrific. And the Realtor, now, we don't have, I would use someone else, we know, I mean, she was good, the panelists were fine last,
it was
Was
Kelly,
it Kelly? Kelly Higgins?
Kelly Higgins.
Kelly Higgins, yeah.
I mean, there's certainly other people that we can
Yeah.
reach out to. I don't know if you have other suggestions, you guys.
No, I would suggest somebody different. I mean, I like Kelly, you know, but.
Oh, sure, I would, yeah.
But I would think somebody different would be good, and a different agency, totally.
Right,
But those should be not that difficult to get.
yeah.
Let me see if I can get a name or recommendation.
Yeah, once you've locked in,
Okay.
then I'll approach Jim,
Okay.
I think he'll be very amenable.
Great. And everyone has our new bifold brochure
Yes.
from the Affordable Housing Trust?
Yeah.
I can certainly amend it, I can now drop in a picture from the billboard of the,
Well, that's why I only
Yeah.
put it 100.
yeah, exactly, so
So I figured, as we move forward and we actually have projects that
Exactly.
will help, then
Yeah.
we'll, you know,
Yeah,
come
I
up
had
with
to-
a
I
little
got-
more creative.
had to kind of skirt around that we didn't actually have something built yet,
And
to show.
we'll talk about the IRS thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we haven't talked about parking, and we also haven't talked about the, plan, but maybe we could talk about parking first. Keep some momentum.
Well, I think,
I'm
my
sharing.
small analysis showed that we have opportunities, and I really like the recommendations that have worked their way into the draft P O C D. So I think, there's anything that you've missed. I think we're on the same page in terms of what you've, called out there. I do think, and it wasn't part of the analysis, but 140 Mill Plain is no longer a COVID testing site, and that wasn't, obviously now reverted back to overflow commuter parking, permit parking, which we'll never need, because we're not using 2/3 of the station parking that exists. I think that, that parcel is ideal.
Yes, you and others have noticed.
I mean, so I don't know what, you know, I don't know. It's town-owned land.
Yep.
1.4 acres, right in the transit district. Got a bus stop outside. I mean, it's just walkable. It's just, I mean, you could put a cluster in there. You could, there's a lot of stuff you could do in there, I'm sure.
True.
Now, could we pick a second? I mean, I know Steve thinks we ought to look for
Well,
low-hanging fruit.
we could pick a lot, but like, so others, I'm sure there are others who have other desires for that property, that aren't along the lines of affordable
I'm
housing.
sure it wouldn't come as a surprise that the town has received unsolicited offers.
I'm sure.
for that property.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
You know, our response generally has been, you know, this kind of similar to the Stratfield situation in the area near Sacred Heart we talked about. There needs to be some kind of robust planning process involved where you talk to the, not that the neighborhood directs it, but you certainly have to get some input in terms of the community and the neighbors who have a fairly challenged intersection there on Mill Plain Road.
Of course, yep.
Probably the most restricted, challenged intersection I can think of in Fairfield. Confluence of factors there, a bad five-legged intersection to begin with, and you have limited stacking capacity because of the Metro North pass, which is also part of the, you know, resiliency hazard mitigation study, because it's all the other passes, it floods. So,
Sure.
there are a lot of issues, and I do think that it is not being obviously utilized to its fullest potential.
Right.
I think we can all envision a lot of different, higher and best uses for it, certainly better than what's currently there. But I think we need to be thoughtful in terms of how we proceed.
Of course, yeah.
You know, certainly housing would be illogical, or some kind of mixed-use type development with a housing component. That's certainly feasible. We've talked about the future of even the Parks and Rec department across the street in the event that we finally consummate the acquisition of the Turner Reserve Center. You know, that's only can be used under the no-cost conveyance for recreational purposes. So, you know, the thought was at some point maybe the rec department would move to the Turner Reserve Center. Maybe the Bigelow Center would co-locate there, and you'd have, you know, some opportunities either to do something different from.
The other parcel that comes to mind that was included in my study was the one adjacent to, the Aldi Home Decor on Greenfield.
For
I mean,
sure.
that was overflow parking when customers needed it
As we parked there
years
for the
ago.
ground
As we park there, you know, it's like, it's on a street that we're already developing and have developed. I mean, it's just a natural, I mean.
Yeah, so I think the one thing that the POCD does talk at very high level about the need to look at our parking, because we're excessive requirements. Doesn't specify what.
Well,
So
it
the
does
next
make a
step would
recommendation in terms of modifying the requirements. You don't need 5 per thousand, perhaps.
It does talk a little bit.
A little bit about it. I mean, that's in there.
I thought, right?
Right,
But it
so,
doesn't talk about.
You're recommending 4, I think it should be
It
probably
doesn't,
3.
I don't think, to the level of specificity,
Right.
talk about the situations that you're
No,
talking about,
no,
which
that's-
are the multi-tenanted commercial properties where we keep adding parking regardless of, you know, how much parking we actually need. So at some point, there just needs to be
I wonder
There needs
if
to be a
going
cap.
with the sliding scale would make more sense than saying X per thousand. You know,
Right.
when you get to a
Sure.
certain point.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing is, there needs to be, you know, with all these,
Right.
the POCD talks about broad policy direction.
Of course,
You actually
yeah,
have to text
yeah.
amendment to do that. We could advance
Mhm.
text amendment to make these changes, but, you know.
Well, how do we keep the parking,
So do you approach,
the momentum.
do you approach the owner of that property?
We have had conversations with that owner. The
Okay.
owner is very interested, as probably you would imagine most owners when they look at,
Well,
you
sure,
know,
because they're,
acres of
yeah,
asphalt,
right.
and, you know.
yeah,
what
can we
do
put it to
different?
better use? Yeah.
And that would be a possibility too, which is, and I did actually provide a copy of your report, to a couple of owners.
Oh, good, good.
So, you know, the other possibility would, anyone can make an application to Planning and Zoning Commission for
Of course,
tax amendment. They
yeah.
could do it concurrent with the site plan application that would implement some of these changes
Yeah.
and make better use of their parking.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think then the commission would have to weigh the impact of that specific site as it relates to the fact more broadly.
Sure.
'Cause, you know, it doesn't typically deal with one property, so in that regard, I think
Yeah.
your analysis is very helpful. It does kind of paint the picture in terms of
Yeah.
what the community-wide impacts might be.
And the other piece is part of the westbound parking area. I mean, you could use the air rights for
Well,
something.
I think,
I mean, do you agree with, like,
I think when we get to our, so again, we're POCD zoning regulation update, which
Right,
we have a draft,
Yep.
that we circulated to our commission. We've been very POCD focused, but that is also ready to be reviewed by our, you know, our commission has it, so that's ready to kind of talk through, adopt that, and then move on to the next phase, where I think it's entirely appropriate for,
yeah,
you know, this committee to forward something to the commission that
Mhm.
says, you know, in partnership, we'd really like to look
Yeah.
at the parking regulations.
concrete example.
Yeah.
Yeah, with, yeah.
I guess in the one specific example you provided, I mean, your thoughts on opportunities for a specific parcel like that that's town owned, I would think, and there are, in terms of the process, I would think it needs to be more thoughtful, kind of similar to.
I think so. I mean, I think, you know, it's very challenging to not have, you know, public outreach about this kind of thing. If anything, you know, there's an 8-24 process required that has to go to our commission,
Mhm.
where our commission has to look at it and say, well, you know, we never really looked at that for
Sure.
X, Y, or Z use. And then they have to kind of provide a determination even before it could go to the Board of Selectmen, for example, for repurposing, you know, that parcel that was previously used for commuter parking to now something else. And I agree with Mark, like
And that's fine.
I feel like if we don't do a public process, whoever it's initiated by, whether it's Plan and Zoning, whether it's the Affordable Housing Committee, you know, it sets it up poorly for adoption, I feel, right?
I mean, you don't have to. I mean, obviously, we have had situations in the past where we've reused pieces of town-owned property for
Mm.
another purpose, Greenfield Commons,
Mhm.
Pocket Park, and went to the Parks and Rec Commission and said, we have a
Sure.
different idea.
Well,
for
Operation
use.
Hope on,
So we didn't do
on
an
Tungus
extensive
Hill, right?
planning study, but
Yeah,
we went through some, you know, it's gonna, obviously, anything the town does is a public process, but I do think there will be more,
especially because
sensitivity
it's a
to that
bigger
area.
piece. Yeah, it's
Of
a bigger
course,
piece.
the property, and,
Yeah.
and again, given some of the challenges on that particular roadway, which I hear about all.
Sure. Yeah.
And
That's
so
fair.
to speak to that too, I mean, maybe that's where you tie in a traffic
Bigger-
study
bigger
with,
analysis.
Oh, yes.
you know, you're looking at a safety study in
Yep.
hopes of revitalizing that piece.
Mhm.
And then, you know, you can kind of tackle both things at one
Mhm.
time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Thank you.
I think that what we have for the remainder of this evening is just to maybe talk about the goals briefly. And, the ongoing business items. On the goals, I guess that I had raised was, you know, we have 5 areas where we've really been focusing on. It's inclusionary zoning, it's working with, housing authority, it's rental housing, housing trust fund, I think what we kind of added was the outreach.
Education awareness, right?
Yeah, the education and outreach. And it would be good if we could wrap up one of these by the end of the year, or at least have a plan to wrap up some part of it, you know, subject to other things that are going on, you know, with the TOCD and I don't think we could wrap up mental health, for example. And I don't think we can wrap up inclusionary zoning either, but I think if we want to, this would be a good time, I think, for us to make input on the inclusionary zoning, proposal to the POCD as a, able to do that. But just so we don't continue to have 13 or 11 or 13, depending upon everything else, initiatives that carry over to next year and.
Yeah.
So
That's the inclusion of zoning, you're talking about raising the percentage.
the percentage.
Yeah.
I think what we suffer from a little bit is having more discrete subtasks within the overarching goal. These are big, high-level things that require coordination amongst a lot of different partners, many of whom are probably preoccupied with their own stuff. We may need to come up with smaller, more discrete and actionable things that we can accomplish in a year. You know, maybe it's not the whole thing, but we're
Right.
moving the ball forward.
I think we probably need to do that. And, yes, you know, what we probably can do by the end of the year is come up with a housing trust, soft guidelines and
We have that, actually.
and the outreach plan, I think we really already have.
Yep.
A plan for that, a draft that we can just, to everybody, we had talked about before, that we'll work toward over the next 6 months in terms of, you know, reaching out to the community, letting them know what we're doing and engaging with them and in youth seminars. But, so what we're saying, I guess, is that maybe something like the inclusionary zoning and the middle housing, we need to break into components.
I think we do, yeah. I mean, we've made some progress on both fronts to some extent. I mean, even the inclusionary zoning, you know, the TOD is 12%, you know.
How would you break it into components?
Well,
Zoning is townwide, we've got the TOD
it is,
already.
but I don't have a ready answer. I'm just thinking that some of these are such big, broad goals that it might, you know, if we want to make progress, if we don't want to pick one and try to put all our apples in that basket, which I think is risky because a lot of things that are outside of our, we want to try to advance 5 things simultaneously with a volunteer group that meets monthly. We need to look, you know, smaller and say, you know, we're going to do this piece to get to the end result that we want.
The other part of that is that we need planning and zoning to do most of the stuff that we have on our list.
And they're totally
And they're tied up, aren't they?
tied up right now.
Respect the inclusionary zoning, so there is a provision, I think, going for 15%. That's sort of an aspiration that's in the.
That's in the POCD, yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
if we think that's if we don't think that's feasible, we probably ought to speak up.
I don't think it's, I mean, I have my concerns about the implementation, especially in the current circumstances, but I don't think it's harmful to have, it's not locked, you know, nothing in the POCD
No,
is locked in. It tends to be aspirational, tends to be broad picture, and the actionable implementation steps are what follows. So I think it doesn't hurt to point towards a higher percentage of inclusionary set aside, because that's what we've talked about.
Yeah.
But whether we can realize it within the 5 or 6 year or 10-year planning time horizon is
Come on, we can do it. It's not gonna take 6 years, come on.
may not.
Yeah.
It may
okay.
not. But I'm just saying, you know, what Herb's saying is whether that's realistic or not. Maybe it's not. Maybe we conclude at some point it's not realistic.
well, I'm just wondering if we shouldn't really, put on paper, better than we have, and just say, it's not doable in 2023 or 24, based upon our projection, the environment and other factors, but doable in 2025 and 2026 for these reasons.
I would welcome that. Yeah, I think we've started to do that preliminary analysis. You know, we've shared some information, but, you know, we can work it out. I mean, it is the math.
I think that would be a good, you know,
There are always assumptions that have to go into this, and that's
Sure.
where there's a little bit of an art to it, so.
that would be a piece of big number one that we could tackle this year.
Determine the feasibility of moving the inclusionary zoning requirement from 12% to
This environment, yeah.
be helpful.
Or do you guys, if you could also, for our benefit, let us know if other communities are at that 15%?
We have done that analysis initially.
Because I think New Canaan is at 20, right?
Westport's at 20,
Okay.
or at least for some. It's not
Yeah.
town-wide. And our question with a lot of these is, and I think we've posed that question to communities, is, well, how many units have you created?
Yeah.
Right.
That's bottom
Because
line,
we think that some communities may put down things on paper that look good, but they're,
We learned that Westport is 20, but it's a limited areas,
Yeah,
and
and it's produced nothing, as I recall. Very little.
There you go.
So, this is, you know,
Be careful what you wish for.
it's great if it looks good on paper, you can point to it, but if
Right.
it doesn't give you any units, it doesn't really matter, so. That's where
our
we're going.
focus would be what's workable.
And, you know, the issue is, we've talked about this with Westport and then further south. I mean, that's part of a different MSA, and their numbers are much higher. Our housing market performs like Norwalk and Westport, but, you know, we don't have the same
Right.
median income that we can work with, for the affordable and market rate unit. So, you know, there's a little bit of that has to go into the calculations. This might not be directly comparable.
We'll work on that offline in terms of whole,
Yep.
interim goal we stay. So I think we have the regular items to sort of.
Yeah, not a lot. I'll just briefly update. You know, there's a lot of progress, actually. I mean, we celebrated the groundbreaking with Habitat to build 4 units of affordable home ownership. That construction is underway. We're in the process of awarding, development rights, to Habitat for the Parkview Commons redevelopment. We hope to not only preserve the 5 existing units, but actually add an additional 8, up to 8 units of affordable ownership there, so 13 units in total. There are 4 projects currently under construction, larger multifamily developments. That includes first building at the Fairfield Metro Center, as well as 830G projects at 5545 Park, 206 Beacon Square, and 528 Black Rock Turnpike, totaling 219 units, of which 54 would be affordable. Combination of several of those will be enough to actually put us over the threshold for a moratorium application early next year, when we have COs for at least 2 of the 4 projects that we anticipate. We have, in addition to the projects we've talked about, there are several others in the wings, one of which is the project for the brownfield redevelopment at 81 Black Rock Turnpike. We just recently received review, and I believe they're coming in for a formal application, an 830G development in Southport at 110 Woodrow Avenue. It's a 23-unit development. We've looked at that site a long time.
In Southport?
In Southport, right off exit 19. I think it's a good site, actually, for this kind of development. And as we talked at the beginning of the meeting, the potential conversion of an office building, 2-story office building, to 18 units of residential. You know, what we've talked to the owner of that property and several others is there a potential to create, we know the requirement is to do 10% or 12% affordable to households earning at or below 80% of the income or inclusionary zoning provisions. Is there a potential either to target lower income thresholds or create more units than what is otherwise required. And how we would do that is to offset the costs associated with that, either through some kind of direct subsidy, perhaps through contribution to the Housing Trust Fund, or could we provide some kind of tax break, offset that differential cost? And there is, as I mentioned before, a provision in our town code, an ordinance, that allows us to do that. It's enabled under state statutes. We've only used it for nonprofits, but there's nothing that would limit us solely to nonprofits. So I think that's worthwhile, because if you have a project, let's say the project we talked about at Katona, you could do not 2, but 5 or 6. You're making it cost neutral to the developer, but you're getting the benefit for additional. Why wouldn't you do that, rather than building more projects everywhere else? So I think it's worth having a conversation. So I do think there's a lot of stuff happening. You know,
Where's the Woodrow property?
off of exit 19,
You know
right
how you
next
would
to
go
where.
past Formandale?
Yeah.
Indian
Where-
restaurant?
Yes.
Yeah,
Next to Formandale, there's an empty lot.
there's an empty lot.
There's an empty lot there. And we've talked, it was approved for medical, an office building.
Veterinary or something, I
Veterinary,
think.
no, there's veterinary up the street. It was approved for an office building, never built. I've talked to several other developers looking at it for residential in this neighborhood in terms of like 15 to 25 units. I think it's not a bad location.
And these will be probably relatively pricey units.
Well, it's an 830G, and again, its proximity to the highway, I would think would mitigate, what the market rate potential of the rental
The
units.
unit sizes
They're
range
small.
from like,
Aren't they one bedrooms or?
no,
they're
well, there
mixed?
were one bedrooms, and I think the one bedrooms were pretty good sized one bedrooms, because I think they were 700. So that's not too bad for a one bedroom, and then I think the larger units were 1,400, 14 to 1,600 for a two bedroom. So those are pretty good size, right?
Yeah.
That's what I recall.
So in any event, I think there are some, you know, we haven't even touched upon, you know, looking at other properties like we've talked about, similar to 234 Greenfield, where there might be kind of an underutilized or dilapidated building in our neighborhood that, you know, maybe that might be a candidate, some kind of purchase, redevelopment.
What about the old guy that's got like 5 properties around
We're
town?
talking to him,
Yeah?
yes. Trying.
Which old guy, there are a lot of them.
Well, yeah. Well, there's one down by.
More and more every day.
Not mention names.
He's got one there, he's got one behind the car dealership, he's got one on Black Rock, or 2 on Black Rock.
Yeah.
And they're all ripe for renovation or redevelopment.
Yeah.
You are correct.
Yeah.
I've actually started to, look at this a little more, detailed and looking at dilapidated, old 70, 100-year-old properties. And just in a couple of hours of driving, found 10 that, are mostly in Zone B, one in R3 and one in Zone A. Just on the eastern side off of Old Stratfield, you know, very old, established park. Small parcels, small land, sizes, small, living area. And from the outside externally, you look and see, you know, the roof needs to be replaced. They haven't, done anything with the shrubberies except let them grow for, you know, a long time. They're just tired, distressed, I mean, they're just dilapidated old homes. They're tear downs, basically. We have a lot of old housing stock, obviously, in town, and so, and obviously people are living in them. And so I think it would be very easy to come up with 40 or 50 potential locations in the next couple of weeks.
This is what developers do.
You know,
Drive around and do the
just
same
driving,
thing.
it's just.
Identify an old.
So I've got to start on that, and I'm gonna build a big database, and for those of you who also like to just drive around and look at these kinds of properties, give me the
I think we're all
address.
familiar with them, so, yeah.
Well, we
I mean, there's just some really appealing sites. I mean, there's one on Third Street that's got a, structurally unsound, barn, which one, that's this one, it's on a corner lot, on a dead end, and it's just, I mean, it looks terrible, right? I mean, it's just, it's, you know, and some of these, you know, the appraised value is a couple $100,000, some are a little more, when you look at the.
Is that
the
vacant?
field card.
Is that vacant or is that occupied?
I saw a guy walk into the house when I was
Yeah.
there, so, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah.
You know? But, I mean, it's just that these are tear downs, so they exist. I mean, and sometimes they're hidden from shrubbery, and you can't really see them. But, you know, we can easily, readily, and I encourage, the rest of you to kind of do likewise, because these are clearly tear downs. People are living in them, for the most part, from what I can tell. But there could be opportunities,
And that.
there, that maybe they're trying to get
That's
out of an
perfectly
untenable
fine.
situation.
People live there, it's just that at some point, they may wanna sell. And if they
Exactly,
wanna sell,
exactly.
maybe
Yeah.
there's an opportunity.
Maybe there's an
So
opportunity.
it's not like we're trying to take property or do
Yeah.
anything like that.
And if there's a way we could ameliorate, if they're gonna take a capital gains hit, because they owned it for 100 years, it's now worth a lot ostensibly, then maybe there's ways we could be creative to, help give them an incentive to get out from under something that's become very untenable, and make an offer. So who knows? But I'll keep you posted. But I encourage all submissions.
Yeah.
That's great, but we need to get,
Yeah. Have you spoken to Sherry Stenick recently?
Actually, I just saw her today and said, we need to have a conversation.
Yeah.
So she's.
I'll give you this is what I came up with.
Yeah.
Like,
She won't sell her property, the property that I'm interested in eventually, she owns behind her commercial property.
That's
Because of
vacant,
its
right?
proximity, it is vacant,
Yeah.
it's in very poor condition, which is what prompted me to say, I'm sure there are properties like this out in
Yeah.
town.
Yeah,
We've
there are.
all driven past them. You don't know what the backstory is or what the
Sure.
interest level is,
Sure.
but at some point, somebody may decide, hey, I'd like to sell, and, you know, it would be good for us to be in the conversation as opposed to somebody who's gonna knock it down.
And you can tell some of these have been in the family since they
But, you know,
purchased it 80, 90 years ago.
Sherry's talked to me about it,
Yeah.
and, you know, I was thinking
The one
that-
on Post Road?
No, other property, but, she owns. And so she's interested in doing something, so we'll try to figure out, she's insisted on doing it herself, but not abandoned right now, so.
anything else, as far as,
So in terms of the Housing Trust Fund, we are currently, with the reserve for additional position within the Parkview Commons development, we have uncommitted balance of $552,567 as of the 31st of August. That's available. We, already talked about Greenfield Street, we talked about the Parkview Commons development. I think the next step there, I went back and looked at the timeline, a lot of moving parts, but, you know, I think we can hopefully condense the schedule a little bit, having gone through that with Habitat for, Greenfield Street, we can hopefully condense a few of those today. Next step would be to negotiate a development agreement and ground lease for that.
What about 2318 Mill Plain,
Oh,
you know?
bring up that. Well, you know, you were quoted in absentia.
Yeah.
I will say that, sorry, because I drafted the memo and the regs, but, you know, I would say at the time in which we proposed the inclusionary zoning regulations to the Planning and Zoning Commission, we knew, no matter how carefully you craft language, there's always folks that will thoughtfully exploit loopholes in that. We knew at the time, and we looked at how many 10-lot subdivisions or 5-lot or greater subdivisions have been made, in the preceding 10 years. So there was some thought that went into it. Clearly, we have people now proposing 9-unit developments. We have this instance where there's a conversation of whether this is a 9-lot or a 10-lot subdivision, depending on whether you count the existing house that's there. And, you know, I think both attorneys made valid points. I would say that at the time, you know, I think we focus more on the rental piece than the subdivision piece. I didn't think there were gonna be too many 10-lot subdivisions down the road. But, you know, clearly there are opportunities to do that. I think the Planning and Zoning Commission would probably decide this either way. And maybe they wanna, get the advice of council, because I'm not sure legislative intent is all that meaningful. I would think they probably asked the town attorney to weigh in if they felt so compelled. But there were a couple issues that came up during that hearing. The open space, fee in lieu calculation, and, you know, whether or not the developer owes the town, a unit under our inclusionary zoning provisions. At least one.
At least one. Yeah.
So there were, you know, conversation about whether there was prior subdivisions that, you know, were done in a way that circumvent the rules. So, yeah, I think both attorneys did make some good points. I don't know that what we say here is gonna have, first of all, the hearing's closed.
Right.
So at this point, I think the commission, if it felt so inclined, they would probably wanna ask the town attorney for an opinion.
They would, yeah.
The language, I'm not an attorney, but, so it says, any project that results in a net increase of 10 or more dwelling units,
Yeah,
and
we did choose that
that's,
consciously, yeah.
that language could have been drafted a little bit differently, if it was a net increase.
Much of it comes down to what you mean by develop.
That's
And
the other part of it.
There was no
Read the
agreement.
dictionary
There
out
was,
last night.
there was, depends on the dictionary you have, apparently.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you only learn by getting beaten up, and then you change.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I would just say that we knew at the time that, you know, we're thoughtful in terms of how we drafted this, maybe not as thoughtful as what they described, in terms of being very strategic in the use of the word development, in this word, in this paragraph, and not in the other paragraph. I'm not so sure that we were that thoughtful, but, we knew that there was a good likelihood that somebody would come down about ways in which we kind of gave them a roadmap. We said 10 units.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
you know, we've got 9-unit developments. Now, we talked earlier about, we could reset the floor at some point. We could, take out
There aren't
the...
that many large parcels left.
No, I'm not talking about subdivision. I'm talking about any project results in a net increase. We could take out the net part. We can say, propose a change that would set it at 5, or, you know, whatever we want, you know? So it's, I think it served us well. It certainly moved the needle in a positive direction. Clearly, there are people that take advantage of a few.
Yeah, but as it relates to subdivision, there's been none, right? There's been,
None
this
this
is
size,
one,
yeah.
and then Westway's not a subdivision, so.
No.
um,
We have others that they're gonna be well short of 10.
Yeah,
You know, we get, you know, what we see typically is, you know, 2 lots, 3 lots, and they're tiny.
The
And-
Pasco Hill, is that?
No, that was 7.
Oh, that's 7.
Yeah, so that was, because that's just, it was a bigger lot requirement, and,
Gotcha.
I mean, the flip side of this too is that it will get that 5 per thousand affordable housing fee paid in for every single house that's constructed in this subdivision. So,
True.
you know, there is
True.
a contribution as well.
Yeah.
Which is why we created that.
Yeah.
That was the first
Yeah.
try to get
So,
there.
so I think the commission's really gonna have to, I think they're gonna spend a lot of time talking about this.
I sense there was a split opinion.
I think there was a split
For sure.
opinion.
yeah.
I mean, maybe we need to rethink inclusionary zoning fee.
Is it higher?
I mean, I'd make it higher. I'd make it higher.
I mean, Bob,
I
I'm going to get it higher, but.
I would double it.
So again, when we looked at it originally, you know, the one example that we used, I think, was the standard 10 per thousand.
Mhm,
Said,
right.
we're not daring New Canaan, so we made it 5. But, you know, we got some immediate pushback from the home builders that said that was outrageous, but, you know, we've gotten through it. I mean,
Cry me a river.
well, exactly,
Really.
that's what our response was, which is, hey, look, you know, you're just gonna pass it along, you're passing it through, you're selling the house
Exactly.
for, you know, $1, $2 million, $3 million dollars.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
what's another, you know, $10,000 on that, so it's,
There really is something of a windfall though. for people.
but in the majority, the reality is, and we were thoughtful in terms of how we did this. We're anticipating that this would apply largely to a lot of the work that's being done on university campuses, which we don't receive tax benefits for. So, you know, one of the issues we heard from both universities at the time we first drafted our update to the affordable housing plan is, you know, affordable housing is an issue for our faculty, staff, and students, you know, helping us solve the problem. Well,
Yeah.
you're helping us solve the problem by contributing. So I think when Jim did the analysis, it was over 60%. He was being collected from the two universities. It was very conscious. So, you know, to your point, 10 cents probably doesn't mean a whole lot.
Probably not, no.
Anything else for tonight?
I'm surprised we got through this agenda.
I have one thing. There's a Wine on the Water being hosted by the Friends of the Bigelow Center for Senior Activities,
Wow.
next Thursday, at 5 to 7 p.m.
Is that WHINE?
You forget, the Jackie Durrell Pavilion. Everybody should go, or just send a check.
Is there a motion for adjournment?
Thank you, Heather, for hanging in there.
Yeah.
Heather, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
I don't.
Thanks,
Good
John.
job.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, John.